Welcome back, family and friends, to another episode of Coffee with Cody. This episode, I think we're going to get back on track. I'm going to try and fill in some details about my experiences in education and where I got started, and we'll see how far it gets us, and maybe I'll have to break it up into two segments. Just depends. But I wanted to share with you some thoughts that I had, some of the experiences that I had as far as education goes, and some of the classes I taught and levels and some of those things. So without further ado, we'll get started. I did my student teaching actually in Wolf Point. I finished my college classwork in Billings the summer of 90, and then I came back and in the fall of 1990 I actually did my student teaching under the tutelage of Dwayne Jager. Dwayne was a business teacher in Wolf Point for many years and an assistant coach, and it was a good experience for me working underneath him. One of the things that he really instilled in me, he was known as a very strict teacher. I didn't have too many problems with him when I was in high school. In fact, he was teaching when I was there. I did have him for accounting. I really enjoyed that class. It was very successful. That was one of the things that got me going into business. I actually had after my senior year, I had an offer as a scholarship to go to any business school and give the IRS 3 or 4 years after, kind of like they did with programs for doctors and specialists, giving back to the government and working on reservations and health clinics for tribes and reservations. But for me, working under him, that first fall of 90, was my first experience in the classroom as a teacher, doing my student teaching. Before that, in the process of getting a teaching license and going through your teacher curriculum, you actually have some observations and things that you have to do in the classroom for different classes in college. I want to say that they are, they're called practicums. So those of you that are in education may understand what practicums are and having to observe other classrooms and doing things like that. But in my student teaching, when I came home after that summer of 90 and the work that I did in the classroom in Billings, finishing up my classwork and then only having to do my student teaching left to graduate, I signed up and was able to get him to sign off on being able to tutor me and be my teacher observer for my student teaching. I took over his classrooms after about 2 weeks of following him. I ended up taking over the accounting class that he had, and then also there was several typing classes. I want to say typing 1 and typing 2. And then there was some junior high keyboarding. We did a couple of those classes. And then I think there was another class called business law. And I did the student teaching in that as well. So I had what they call not necessarily 6 preps, but I had 6 periods of teaching. And then your 7th period was usually your prep period, where you prepared your lesson plans for the future classes, and then also did any grading or any of that you might have. that went fairly well for me. One of the things that he did tell me, though, is that as a new teacher and wanting to have good discipline in your classroom, he said, you don't ever smile before Thanksgiving. So, and you don't want to be a buddy to your students. Certainly there's an element of respect there, and it's a two-way street, but it was a good experience for me. I did that student teaching then in the fall of '90, and then once that semester, or the first part of the semester was over, I was done with my classwork, and then I was waiting on graduation the spring of '91. So I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Education with a major and emphasis in business and accounting. And then I had minors in English and math. I also had a minor in communication arts, and then one in information technology. And I also had an endorsement in my certificate that I could teach adult ed classes, which I ended up doing in the summer of '91 for Fort Peck Community College. That's where I began my career at the college there, teaching summer classes. I taught some algebra classes, intermediate algebra, some basic math classes for the adults. Excuse me. And so that first year of teaching was quite an experience. The second semester of that school year, '90 to '91, I actually worked as a para in the special ed department with a one-on-one student that I worked with. And then I also worked with him in the summertime as well. I did that in addition to the college work that I did, teaching a couple classes in Wolf Point. They had a campus in Poplar and one in Wolf Point, and I taught some classes in Wolf Point just to get started. And I eventually, down the road, did some college teaching, so we'll get to that later on. The experience that I had from teaching allowed me to know that Dwayne was going to retire at the end of the school year, and then also retiring was Keith Lewis in math. Now, they hired somebody else for the math position, but I was hired by Casey Stingle, Paul Stingle, who had come back to Wolf Point to fill in as the superintendent, and he was actually the one that recruited me. I didn't really have to do a whole lot of recruiting because that was my intention all along, was to get a teaching job in Wolf Point. And with Dwayne retiring, Dwayne Jagger, I applied for the business position and got that. So I became the business teacher in Wolf Point in the fall of '91. And from there, I had those same classes. I took over all of his classes, the two typing classes for high school, the accounting class, the business law class, and then the two junior high keyboarding classes. So quite an experience. I'll tell you this, coming out of the college ranks and into getting a teaching license, you had to take a test, an exam that qualified you. I want to say it was the NTE, the National Teacher Exam, and you had to score a certain percentage, and it wasn't that easy, to be very honest with you. There was a core element to it, but a lot of it was basic educational information. The problem with that particular test is that there was two philosophies in education that involved a humanist point of view, and the other one was a behaviorist point of view. and you didn't really know the test that you were taking on which view they were looking at. The questions were kind of skewed one way. One question answered would be directed toward a humanist point of view. The other one would be a behaviorist point of view. And it's pretty interesting that I guess what they were looking for is that in their grading of the test, according to your answers, you couldn't waffle back and forth between the two. If you started answering your questions in a behaviorist manner, from that perspective and philosophy, then they wanted that consistency throughout your answer sheet. So I'll tell you that I did pass the test the first time. I know that many of them that didn't and took it several times, but I was very fortunate, and most of my most of my stuff was general knowledge as far as the rest of the test because of all of the minors that I had and everything. But I passed the test and I got my teaching license, which allowed me to begin teaching then in the fall of 1991. And that was my first school year, 91 through 92. The first of 10 consecutive years in Wolf Point. And I'll speak to that a little bit more later on. But as far as discipline goes, I really didn't have too much of a problem with that. Of course, I had always had a stern voice. They say I always had a certain look that you didn't want to get from me, whatever that was. Those of you that were my students in the past certainly can remember that and recall that. I know that in numerous teacher evaluations that I received, one of those was about my voice and toning it down in the classroom a little bit. Well, I'm the kind of individual that's my voice is my voice, and it's loud and it carries, and it may have a little firm tone to it, but certainly I didn't really have that problem with discipline by maybe saying something a little bit more firmer or giving the students the look or the eye or whatever that might be. But I'll tell you, one of the hardest things that I had to deal with, and I don't know if this is true for a lot of other teachers and people in general, was any time that you had a classroom where you had twins, a set of twins. I really struggled with identifying twins that were identical and trying to figure out who was who. Just in particular, off the top of my head, I had a set of twins, the Martell boys. There was a set of twin girls that came later on, the Jetmores. And then, of course, the last pair that I will tell you, very good friends to this day with my daughter. They were about her age, and that was the Reinslaughter twins, Amy and Brandy. So we had Lauren and Aaron Jetmore. We had John and James Martell, and Amy and Brandy Reinslaughter. And it was awful hard at times trying to distinguish who was who, and they could pull the wool over my eyes if they wanted to, but thankfully I didn't. That was one of the reasons that you had a seating chart, and if they wanted to switch up one day and sit in each other's chair, they certainly would have fooled me, because I wouldn't have known, and that was probably one of the hardest things. What I always tried to do as a teacher was to break my information down to a student's level. I know that one of the things that they harped on through your teaching information that they gave you in college was to try and find the best learning style of students. You had students that were better at hands-on stuff. You had students that were auditory. They learned through listening. And then you also had those students that were visual learners. They could take good notes from a a blackboard or a whiteboard eventually. As chalk was down the road, it wasn't very long in the initial stages of my teaching career. Everything went to a whiteboard and markers. But that was one of the things that I took pride in, was trying to do the best I could to identify each student individually and their learning style. I know that one of the statements or sayings that they really frowned on was that you didn't want to be a teacher who was a sage on the stage and spoon-fed everybody. What I tried to do is to disseminate the information and then let the students try to learn on their own. I didn't want to spoon-feed them. In fact, there were times when I taught math classes later on that I would force the students to do things by hand first and then use the calculators. Those calculators could become a crutch, but I never allowed my students to do that. And many of them got frustrated with that because they knew that what I was asking them to do, they could simply push buttons on a calculator and find the answer. So that was part of my growth as an educator. I think that's where I want to stop for now. Maybe I'll talk a little bit more about my second year. Gradually what happened was that more and more it was harder to find math teachers, and so the teachers that were on staff were kind of disseminated into other classes, and I moved from some business classes into teaching math. One of the things was that I became an Algebra 1 teacher for a year or two, and they eventually hired a second business teacher. I think at the time that business teacher was Vicki Smith, Vicki Huff. You know her today as Vicki Bisbee. So she was the first one that the school system hired to fill in some of those business classes that I had and expanded some of the business offerings that we gave as a school system. And then eventually down the road, about 1993, fall of 93, maybe the spring of 94, we went into a new math curriculum they called SIMS. And I know that was a two-edged sword, a double-edged sword, because there were students that did well with that and students that didn't do so well. And so I think what I'll do is I'll wait and talk a little bit about the SIMS program and what it tried to do, and then maybe go a little bit further into my career in education and in the classroom, and talk about some of the other classes that I taught, and just give you some of that information. So I think that's it for this episode. Don't want to get it too long, don't want to ramble much longer. And so with that, this has been Coffee with Cody, signing off.